Hello, this is Wayne Dyer, and I'm here to talk to you about something that I think of as one of the most important things you can learn in your life. How to pull your own strings. Pulling Your Own Strings was a book that I wrote back in 1978. I think I appeared on about 3,000 talk shows across the country talking about it over the years. It was a bestseller for many, many years. And still, to this day, continues to be something that people who want to be more assertive and who do not want to have their strings pulled by others refer to on a regular basis. I'm very proud of this book, and talking about this again after all these many years is an interesting, exciting kind of voyage for me, because it's always good to remind yourself that you don't want to be a victim, you don't need to be a victim, that you have a right to your own freedom in life, and that you have the absolute right to choose to live the kind of life that you want to. Unfortunately, and this is the whole basis of this tape, most people do not make that kind of choice. Most people in our culture allow themselves in one way or another to be victimized by people and institutions and family and organizations and jobs and even strangers and clerks and bureaucrats. And they say things to themselves almost from a resigned point of view. It's just the way it is. We live in a society that victimizes each other. We have to play the game. There's nothing we can do about it. It's just something that happens, and it happens to all of us. And I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to happen to you. It doesn't have to happen at all in any areas of your life. That there are specific strategies and ways of processing your world and your life that will allow you to get out of the victim habit. And being a victim is truly a habit. It is something that you have grown up with, that most of us have grown up with. Most of us grow up with a set of beliefs that we have to fit in. I remember my favorite poem of E.E. Cummings was one little line where he said, to be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you just like everybody else means to fight the greatest battle there is to fight and never stop fighting. And that's basically what this is. It's an effort to help you to declare your independence. In the Declaration of Independence itself, Thomas Jefferson put it this way: all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. And what this is about, pulling your own strings, is helping you to abolish the forms to which you have become accustomed. There are many ways to be a victim. Some people just operate from weakness all their lives. Some people are victimized by the past or institutions or family. And I'm here to tell you in this tape that pulling your own strings is really an attitude shift. A shift away from having to be just like everybody else, having to fit in, having to do what you're told, having to listen to other people as the determiners of what your life is going to be, being intimidated by others, being bullied by others, being fearful of what might happen to you if you were to live your life the way you want to. I'm saying to you that you do not have to live that way, that being a victim is a learned habit. It is not your natural way of being. It is just something that you have accepted. And as long as there are people or institutions or organizations that will suffer those evils upon you, and as long as you're willing to accept them and take that kind of abuse, whether it's mental or physical or emotional or any other way that it can be expressed for you, as long as you're willing to accept it and take it and to fit into that role, there will be those out there who will indeed be willing to continue their role of putting you in your place. So being able to pull your strings means changing around some expectations that you have for yourself. And that's the very beginning. That's the hardest part for most people, because most people are victims not because the world is such a bad place and because there's so many bad guys out there. It's because people have accepted that role and have a set of expectations about where they fit in this world. And very often they believe that they fit in underneath someone else's thumb, or being dictated to by someone else, or keeping quiet when inside you're bursting to express yourself. That may be a role that you have learned and adopted. And there are other kinds of victim traps as well. You may be a very assertive, aggressive, outgoing person and still be victimized by a lot of the beliefs that you have, your emphasis on making the place where you work perhaps more important than your own life. You may have placed loyalty to the institution of your choosing above the loyalty to yourself as a human being. You may be making things more important than people. You may be victimizing yourself physiologically by abusing your body with addictive substances, or with the wrong kinds of foods, or not the proper exercise. You may be victimizing yourself through type A behavior, where you're always in a hurry and always facing deadlines and never able to enjoy your life. There's an old saying that I've always loved that said that nobody on their deathbed ever wishes that they had spent more time at the office. Like, oh, gee, if I'd only spent 15 hours a day instead of 14, I could die happily. Or if I'd only, made a little bit more money. That isn't what it's about. That people wish always, as they get to the end of their life, that they'd spent more time with the people they love, that they had rearranged the priorities of their life so that they could live the kind of life that they want to. And I'm here to say that you can. What are the non-victim expectations? What kinds of expectations do victims have? Well, let me look at just a few of the major categories of these, and the most important ones. The first is in your physical capacities and capabilities. What kind of expectations do you have about yourself, physically? The kind of human being that you are, the kind of body that you have and that you've shown up in. Do you believe that it's limited? Do you believe that it has to be sickly? Do you believe that you don't have the capacity to heal it, to make it well? Do you believe that other people are stronger and can do things that you can't do? The notion of your physical body and what you expect of it is something that you can really drastically change around. It was only in my life when I really knew that I could get myself to maximum health, super health, if you will. And I did that many, many years ago. Changed around the expectations that I had to live out a life of a flabby lifestyle. And since October the 7th of 1976, I have run a minimum of 8 miles every day, and I've never missed a day. And that is a lot of years and a lot of days into the 1990s without missing a day. And it's only because I have an expectation that that's something that I can do. It's not a compulsive behavior. It is just a way of being. It's no more compulsive than brushing my teeth every day, something that I do as a way of life. And I changed around a whole lot of expectations about my own body and how healthy it can be. I've changed around expectations about what I have to put into my body, and therefore things like alcohol and drugs and even caffeine and salt and all of the kinds of things that we put into our body indiscriminately and poison ourselves with are no longer choices that I made. Not because I've got such great discipline and I'm some kind of a super being. Not at all. It's because I've changed my expectations around of what my body can do. And once you get yourself aligned in a higher consciousness way about who you are and what you can do, your body just takes over. That is, your body fulfills its own perfect destiny. It is a temple. It is a temple that houses your soul and houses your mind. And keeping that body in maximum shape is something that any of us can do. But you've got to change around your expectations and not be a victim of it. There's also the whole notion of your mental capacities. So many people believe that they're just average, that they're only capable of doing mediocre kinds of things, that they're C students, if you will, that they fit in the middle somewhere. I believe there's a genius residing in you, and that genius is waiting to awaken. And the awakening process is really, once again, changing around your expectations, shifting your consciousness from a belief that you are average, or that you're mediocre, or that you can only accomplish a certain number of things, to shifting it to I am a creative genius. I am here on this planet for a reason. The whole universe is part of a perfection, a perfect system. There's an intelligence to the whole system. I believe the entire universe is part of a perfect intelligence that is making the whole thing work, invisible though it may be, and you are part of that. And there's no accident there, and you're here for a reason. And when you get your life onto purpose, you will find that your mental capacities begin to grow enormously. When you believe and expect that you are capable of handling anything in a mental capacity, when you know that in your heart and in your soul, then you no longer continue to think like a victim. Your emotional capacities. This is something that people victimize themselves with over and over and over again every single day. Again, notice the emphasis. People victimize themselves with. Other people will only victimize you if you allow them to. And I'll speak more about that later. But your emotional capacities, I believe that you choose your own feelings. Your feelings come from your thoughts. And if you can learn how to control your thoughts and understand that your thinking is what creates emotions in you, then you can choose the emotions you have. You don't have to be upset. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be anxious. You don't have to be fearful in given situations. It may be the way that you normally would react, and maybe you'll continue to react that way. But it's still a choice. Your emotional reactions are choices. And when you know that, then you'll be able to catch yourself when you find yourself immobilized or out of control or being pushed around or victimized by your own emotional reactions. Who are the victimizers? Who are the people out there that are manipulating and controlling us? Well, I have a few categories here. The number one on this category is the family. As much as my family is important to me, I don't think there's anything more important in my life. I don't have to say I don't think. I know there's nothing more important in my life than my wife and my children. And they're all very, very important to me. I have 7 of them. Each one of them is precious and dear and has their own purpose and is on their own path. And I try to keep that family life something that isn't going to later be the source of their being victimized emotionally. If you look at virtually everybody in mental institutions across the country and take a survey or a poll on what it is that they couldn't deal with and why they ended up mentally unbalanced or incapacitated in some way, you'll find that about 99% of it is from families. Families. People telling each other how they have to be, what they have to think, how they have to dress, what their values ought to be, what their religious and spiritual orientation ought to be, what kinds of cars they ought to drive, what kinds of food they ought to eat, who they ought to talk to, who they have to hate, who they have to stay away from, who they have to be victimized by, if you will. Families. And you have to be very, very careful as a member of a family and understand that while it is the most important institution in our culture, it is also the one that does the most damage. And you have to know that in order to be your own person and not be having your strings pulled by somebody else, you're going to have to stand up to family members, whether they're immediate family or extended family. The ability and the willingness to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to be what you think I ought to be. I have to stand up for it and be the kind of person I am. That's what pulling your own strings is about. Not allowing anyone, family or otherwise, to be your victimizer. The other big victimizer is the job. A lot of people don't like their job. A lot of people feel that they're not pursuing their bliss. They're not following their own purpose and why they're here. And they find themselves being pushed around and even going to work every single day and going home and being full of remorse, and then that remorse continues to grow and so on. If you feel victimized by your job, then you have to take some time to ask yourself why you're allowing yourself to stay and do things that don't make sense to you or don't fit in with what your own view of why you're here is all about. Another big victimizer is professionals and authority figures. People are intimidated. So many people are intimidated by that whole teacher complex or that whole doctor complex. They go into a dentist's office, and they're the ones who's paying the bill, and they're the ones who's making this whole thing happen. That beautiful office you see there is because it's costing you a fortune to have a crown put on your tooth, and you're calling him doctor, and he's calling you by your first name. When it seems to me it ought to be the other way around. And being intimidated by authority figures, whether it's medical people, and sure, it's nice to show respect to other people, and I'm not saying you ought to be disrespectful, but I'm saying you ought not to ever place anybody else's head above your own. And people do this with authority figures all the time, police and military and people who have money, and all of these kinds of people in positions of authority can be a big category of victimizers. Bureaucracies are an enormous victimizer in our culture, particularly in Western culture, where we have to keep records for everything that we do. Just make an appointment with the Social Security Administration sometime, or go to have your driver's license renewed, or go down to the post office, or go to an IRS office and sit down and try to get some information, and you find yourself being shifted around and here and there and everywhere, and this kind of bureaucracy is something that a lot of people feel victimized by. And I think it's unnecessary. I don't think we have to experience it and feel it that way. There are ways to deal with those institutions and keep yourself sane, and I'll be talking about some of those. And finally, the biggest victimizer of all, of course, is yourself. Yep, yourself. Despite all the people in the other categories, the fact is that you are the one who victimizes yourself. You are the one who makes these things more important than yourself. And you are the victim very often of your own training and your own history and your own values and your own behavior towards your body and your own behavior towards your mind, your own self-portraits that you have inculcated over a lifetime. So when you look at all the victimizers out there, and you looked at all the people who are pushing you around, perhaps, or you feel are responsible for a lot of your obsequious behavior, then always keep in mind that you are the product of the choices that you make as you go through your life, and that instead of saying, "Why is this happening to me?" and "Isn't this awful?" and "Why, God, are you putting me through this again?" begin to ask yourself the question, what's in it for me? What's the lesson? What do I have to gain here? And how can I transcend this and get past it? When you do that, you'll begin to move on to the next level, which I call operating from strength. In moving forward towards pulling your own strings in all areas of your life, you want to develop an attitude, a self-portrait, in which you begin to visualize and image yourself as a tower of strength, not weakness. Keep in mind that people respect strength, not weakness. I can remember in teaching for many, many years at the university level and the high school level and even at the elementary level for a while, but particularly at the university level, in the graduate school, I would give an evaluation at the end of the course each year, each semester. And I would get in a whole lot of, most of the people who would fill out these forms would write something, and they'd all say something really nice. "You was terrific, you were great, it was a great course, best class I ever had." And I would just sort of flip through those, very neatly, until I'd get to the ones that were critical, or the ones that were, I felt, helpful and honest, not nasty and not abusive in any way, but people who weren't afraid to say what it is that they really felt. And those are the ones I paid the most attention to. It's interesting. When you are looking for an honest opinion, when you really want help, you're going to go to a person who is not afraid to tell you the truth. And while you know who the people are that you can go to when you want to be stroked, or when you want to be made to feel better, when you need help, and you need an honest, straightforward, truthful answer, you'll respect strength, not weakness. Weakness is saying the thing that makes somebody else feel good. Strength is operating from integrity, from authenticity, from honesty. And people respect that. I know in my own life when I really want to know what it is that I can do to improve something, I know that my wife isn't afraid to tell me that. There's a lot of people who are. There are people who work for me who don't want to tell me that, who are going to tell me the things that are going to make me feel good and make them look good and so on. But I know that my wife, Marcy, will not be afraid to tell me, this is what you have to do, or this is what's missing, or this. And sometimes I don't even like it. And sometimes I rail against it. But I always go to her when I want help or when I want assistance, because I know that she's not afraid to tell me the truth. So people respect strength. People don't respect weakness. And that's something that you have to learn if you're going to be pulling your own strings in your own life. That operating from strength really means operating from effectiveness in your life. It's almost like you have to develop a code of non-victim ethics for yourself that says, I am a valuable, important, significant, divine creation. I am here for a very short time. While I'm here in form, in the physical body that I'm in, I am entitled to fulfill the purpose or the destiny that I have been assigned while I'm here. I believe in that I'm here for a purpose. And I'm going to get my life on that purpose. And anyone or anything that gets in the way of that, as long as I can behave towards them in a moral and just and honest way, I can say to myself in my moral code of ethics, you do not have a right to interfere. No one has a right to interfere with anyone else's right to live their life the way they want to. No one. My right to swing my fist and flail my arms about stops with your right to not have your nose be punched. All right? So as long as you're not hurting anybody else in the process of operating from strength, as long as you're not interfering with somebody else's right to do the same, then whatever it is that you're doing is perfectly all right. Now, there are going to be a lot of people who aren't going to like that. And I've outlined a few of those people already. The family, particularly, are going to be a lot of people in there who are going to tell you that you shouldn't do it this way because it's inconvenient for them, or that isn't going to get them to, they're not going to have anybody to manipulate and to control. And if you go off and just do whatever it is you want to, they might have to do a lot more than they've been used to doing. They might have to clean up after themselves. They might have to take responsibility for their own life. And you've been doing that all along. So they will be spending a lot of energy in attempting to keep you from really asserting yourself and going out and doing what is significant and important for you in your own mind. But you have to be effective. You have to be what I think of as quietly effective. And the way that you are quietly effective is you do not teach people not to victimize you with words. Let me emphasize that. Words are not the tools of the quietly effective person operating from strength. It is behavior that counts. You teach people with your behavior how you want to be treated. And here we are, trying to pull our own strings and be our own person, and talking endlessly and ceaselessly and having these arguments and discussions, and it still goes on and it still goes on, and you still find yourself the victim, and you still find yourself picking up after others or not being respected or whatever it may be. There's an old saying, it's one of the secrets of the universe. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. And not one moment before. Doing is what teaches people how to understand you. So it is in the process of doing, when someone behaves towards you in a way that is to victimize you, like your children, for example, leaving their clothes around, and you endlessly talk to them about not doing this any longer, and you don't want them to leave your clothes around, and don't you understand that I have to pick up your clothes and my clothes, and that's not fair, and you go through this tirade day in and day out, and it still continues. But when you take those clothes and put them in the trash, or when you leave those clothes sit there and don't wash them for them, so that and the only clothes that get washed are those that are in the appropriate place. Or when you teach them with whatever it is that is effective, quietly effective behavior with no words, you let them know specifically, I am not going to be your victim. And this is true of virtually everything. Somebody who is yelling and screaming at you, and whether it's your husband or your wife or one of your children or a clerk or whatever, and if you stand there and scream back, it's just words against words, and it doesn't mean anything. But if you leave quietly, leave the room and go into another room, you're sending a signal. I am too dignified and too valuable and too important a person. I think too much of myself to stand here or sit here and take that kind of abuse. So I will be leaving. And you don't have to say those words. You just do it. And in every single expression wherein you are victimized through conversation or through words, there is a way to teach people with your behavior that you are a person who operates from strength rather than weakness. You must learn to never place anyone in your life in importance above yourself. No one. The Queen of England, the President of the United States, the generals that are in the armed forces, the doctors who serve you, the very rich people who live in the fancy homes in the suburbs, the entertainers, the sports stars, all of these people, whoever they are, the movie stars, whoever these people are, they are no different than you. That's one of the great lessons I learned when I toured the country many years ago for this book and for Your Erroneous Zones, and met appearing on The Tonight Show many times, and on Dinah Shore Show and John Davidson, and all of these shows that were very, very popular at that time. And I met so many of the top stars in music and in entertainment and sports and the recording industry, and it was always interesting to me that none of them, these were the people that were your heroes, none of them were any better than I was. I remember what President Carter said when he was running for office, and they asked him if he thought he was qualified to run for president. He said, well, I really never thought I was until I met all the other people who were running, and then I felt I was just as qualified as they were. And that's always the effect that it has on me when I meet somebody who's in this high position of authority, and I meet them and I talk with them and I find out that they have the same difficulties and the same foibles and the same problems and the same pimples and the little blemishes, and they smell bad too when they wake up in the morning, and they're not any better or different than any of the rest of us. And what you want to do is in your own mind, which is where being a non-victim always takes place, of course, is teach yourself that nobody out there deserves any more accolades or any more attention or any more respect than you do. You are human. You are connected to all the rest of us through that invisible intelligence that runs through all form in the universe. And you are just as valuable. And in God's eyes, no one is any better than anyone else. Know that. And know that it's not only true in God's eyes, but it's true in your eyes as well. And keep that in your mind. And then as you operate from strength, you can try on a few of these strategies. You stop asking permission in your life. You stop seeking permission when you're speaking. Instead of saying, would you mind if I ask you a question, say, I'd like to know if, and whatever the question may be. Instead of saying, would you mind terribly if I return this for a refund, say, I'm bringing this back because I'm dissatisfied. You can do that respectfully. You can do that kindly and gently. Instead of when you're going out with and saying, is it all right, dear, if I go out for an hour? You say, I'm going out, dear. Is there anything that you'd like me to do for you while I'm out? It's a declaration versus a question of getting permission. Get the permission, the idea that somebody else has to give you permission in order to live your life or do the things that you're entitled to do. This is not at all a case for being disrespectful at all of other people. It's a case for just letting the world know, and the people in it that are important to you, that you have a right to live your life without being victimized. It's as simple as that. Don't take it any further than that. When you're talking to people, if you want to operate from strength, look right into their eyes when you talk to them. When you look down or when you look from side to side, you send out a signal. The signal is, I'm not as important as you are. when you hem and haw and and maybe and all of that, you are sending out a signal. The signal is, victimize me. Do whatever it is that you want to do to me. I'm here just for that purpose. Watch your body and your posture and your body language when you're speaking, and make a direct effort to look directly into someone's eyeballs. I do that all the time when I'm speaking to people. I speak in large audiences, and when I'm through, people will come up to me, and I try to always make direct eye contact with that person. It's the window to the soul, and if you don't do that, you're sending out a signal. If someone asks you for a loan, or someone asks you to do things or something that you don't want to do, like serve on a committee perhaps that you don't want to serve on, instead of beating around the bush and playing the victim game and knowing that eventually, by saying maybe and I'm not sure and call me in a week and all of that, you know that eventually they're going to get you. There's such an easy way to handle that. 2 simple letters, N-O, right off the top. No, I'm not interested in that. Thank you for considering me. And then when they come back with all of the reasons why you should be doing what they think you should do and that you don't want to do, your response is, I guess you just didn't hear what I said. Perhaps you didn't hear me when I said that I didn't want to do that. And you never veer from that stance. And it becomes like a wonderful game that you're playing. You know what their game plan is. Their game plan is to get you to do something that you don't want to do. Or to loan you some money when you don't want to loan it, and you know that they're not good for it, or whatever it may be. You know what their game plan is and what their objective is. And all you have to do is just stay on course. Just stay on course. And lo and behold, after a while, they stop. All of that kind of stuff stops. Because you were emphatic enough at the beginning to just simply say, no. If you're a non-smoker and other people are smoking around you or anything like that, and you feel that they're violating your right to have your lungs free from their noxious smoke, then don't be afraid to politely ask someone to do it. Test yourself. Give yourself an opportunity to test your operating from strength behavior. Don't sit there and inhale smoke for an entire evening. In fact, that's one of the reasons why it's become less fashionable for people to smoke, and why fewer and fewer people are doing it, which is wonderful. Because it used to be that the smokers were in the majority, and the non-smokers were the victims. It doesn't have to be that way any longer. And now you're seeing it reversing. People are beginning to pull their own strings. Try calling some people by their first name instead of yes sirring and doctor this and professor that and sir this and all that. Just see what happens. You find that when you keep yourself level with other people, if they're calling you by your first name, they're not any better than you because they have a title, and that isn't necessarily a way that you show people respect. You don't show people respect by what you call them. You show people respect by how you interact with them and how you treat them as human beings. And calling your physician by his first name or whatever is, or whomever it may be, if it's a problem. If it's not, then do it any way you want to. But if you're working on not putting and elevating other people in importance to you, then you have to work on it in all kinds of areas. And the thing that you fear the most, you find that those people, that there was nothing there to fear in the first place. I prefer being called Wayne. I don't like it when people call me doctor this or professor. I don't need that. And I, when somebody comes up to me and says, "Hi, Wayne, how you doing?" or whatever, whoever they are, I always feel that that's a person who's operating from strength. I have more respect for that than I do for the need for someone to place the title. Never be afraid to go over someone's head if you feel like you're being victimized, whether it's in a store or in a business or in a bank or whatever it may be. You don't have to do that callously, but simply just don't assume that because someone has told you something that is going to put you in a position of being a victim, that you now therefore have to accept that. There's always another way. There's always another. And as long as you keep an open mind to that and know that there's someone else that you can go to, that there's some other avenue that you can take, you'll find yourself less and less being victimized. And particularly when those people know that you're not afraid to do that. I found that in dealing with people at banks, that I go directly to the person that I know has authority, if I want something. And it's much more effective than dealing with all of the people in the middle who are really paid to keep you from reaching the person who makes that decision in the first place. When you're being interviewed for a job, or when you're in a situation that might be troubling for you, that's a good time to practice assertive behaviors. You don't ever say things like, I'm not sure if I could handle this. Instead, you say, I'm sure I could handle this. I'm sure I could, because I've found in my own life that there's never been anything that I couldn't handle if I really put my mind to it. You send out that kind of a signal, but it has to come from an integrity, from an honesty, from a belief that you know inside that there is nothing that you have to be afraid of or that you can't handle if you're given the sufficient training. And finally, refuse to pay for poor quality, and refuse to tip for it as well. Stand up for that. It isn't just an obligation to just turn over your hard-earned money to someone who is giving you poor service or poor quality. You're entitled, if you pay for something, to have the best. You're entitled to that. And it doesn't mean that you have to treat other people in a supercilious manner in any way. It just means that you're entitled to that. And you don't have to be obnoxious about it, and you don't have to be cheap about it. I have found that when I'm dealing with waiters and waitresses and so on, that I consider myself a very generous tipper. I always have believed that if you're debating between giving $3 and $4, always go with the higher number, because what goes around comes around, and it's just a good way to be, and it's what your purpose is all about. It's about giving and sharing and caring for others. And if the service is poor, I don't just leave nothing or anything like that. I generally tell them, I say, gee, you're really having a tough time here tonight. There's a lot of people, and it must be. And generally, they will explain what's going on. Oh, there's a cook back in the kitchen who didn't show up, or there's, and you walk out not feeling like you were victimized. And so when you ask, instead of just sit there and fume. I was just flying on an airplane just the other day, and I found we were 20 minutes late. And the pilot had made no announcement. And I feel victimized when things like that happen. I feel that I'm the one that he's flying here. That's the reason he's got all of those bars on his uniform and so on, because there's people like me who are willing to plunk down several $100s to go from Chicago to New York. And here we are 25 minutes late, and no announcement has ever been made about that, and we took off on time. And I just feel that the passengers are entitled to know that. So I just sent a note to the stewardess and said, would you ask the captain to please make an announcement on why we're late? And sure enough, in another minute, he made an announcement. He even apologized for not having done it. So rather than sit there like a victim and feel like I don't know what's going on, he said there was some storms over Lake Erie or someplace, and they had to veer around, and they were going around. And I was grateful. I don't want them flying through those storms. That's fine. I just want to know. I believe that I'm entitled to that. And rather than be angry and all of those kind of things, you operate from strength. You quietly, effectively get what it is that you're looking for. And that's really the message here. You don't have to be a victim, ever. And if you are, you look at your own behavior rather than those who are treating you in some way that you don't like. One of the big victim traps that so many people find themselves in is being seduced by what is over. I always tell people what is over, and you can't change it, you can't should have done it, you can't would have done it, you can't could have done it. You've got to stop all that shoulding on yourself, if you will. And what you want to do here is look at how you get to be victimized by things that have already happened. Like, I can remember moving from Michigan to New York when I took a position as a professor at St. John's University in 1971 or 72. And I arrived on Long Island, brand new home. It was on a Wednesday. We had left on Wednesday. We drove there. We got there on a Friday afternoon. I had a new little baby girl. And we got to our home, and there was no electricity. So I called Lilco, the Long Island Lighting Company. And I got on with them, and this was Friday afternoon now, and I said to the girl who answered the phone, I'd like to have my electricity turned on. We've got a little baby, and we need to have warm. It was in October. And she said, I'm sorry, sir, you should have called on Wednesday. So I put my finger up and down on the phone real hard, about 3 or 4 times. I said, excuse me, is this Earth? And she said, of course it's Earth. What are you talking about? This is local. I said, well, on Earth, where I've lived for the last 31 years, you can never should have called on Wednesday, on Friday. You can't do that on our planet. She said, would you go through that one more time? I said, real easy. I said, on Earth, you can never should have called on Wednesday, on Friday. You can't do that. It's Friday. I can't should have called on Wednesday. She said, I think you better talk to my supervisor. And it took me like 3 supervisors before I got someone who understood that I didn't want to be told what I should have done or what I could have done or what I would have done. I wanted my electricity turned on. And I kept it very light and amusing and so on. And sure enough, someone was sent out that afternoon, and I had my electricity turned on. Now, I can call next Wednesday, but I can't should have called on Wednesday. And you can't should have called or should have done anything. Everything that you did in your life up until this moment is over. It's done. It had to happen in order for you to get to the next level. Accept that. Don't allow yourself to be victimized by things that you can't change, things that are over. Your parents were the parents that they were. Your parents did what they knew how to do, given the conditions of their life. They didn't do it good, they didn't do it bad, they weren't right, they weren't wrong. They just were who they were. And they did what they knew how to do. And if what they knew how to do didn't fit in with what you think they should have been doing, then learn from it, grow from it. Don't be full of anger and hatred for them. That's the biggest victim trap you can get into, being mad at somebody for what they did 25 years ago. And besides, they're a different person today anyway, and probably wouldn't do it that way at all. So what you want to do is look at everything that you find yourself upset about or manipulated by or controlled by, and change all of that. Shift it around. Shift it around to a new kind of consciousness. And that consciousness is, I can't change what's over. So all of the things that you did in your past, and all of the shoulds that people are imposing on you, are things that you're going to have to watch out for. One of the big victim traps people are going to use is they're going to tell you what you should have done. If only you would have listened to me. If only you would have done it before. If only you would have done things the way I said. And when anybody ever does that, that sends off a signal in me. There's a flag that goes up, and I put that. It's a mental flag, and it goes right up into my head. And that flag, it says, I should have done it that way. I already did it. That's already over. And if somebody starts telling me over and over if only you would have listened to me, I will even ask them questions like, how can I have listened to you now? How can I do that? Explain how I can do that. And usually that just stops them, because they see that there's no way that you can have listened to them when that time is over. If only you wouldn't have moved to Chicago in 1957. If only you wouldn't have done that, you wouldn't be having all these troubles now. How could you not have moved in 1957 when it's in 1991? How can you do that? It's not possible. So you have to be watchful for that, and look out for the victimizers who will resort to looking at what is over and try to keep you their victim by constantly putting you back there. Let's take a look at some of these tactics that, quote, victimizers, unquote, use to keep you from being all that you want to be, keeping in mind that you are at this point now refusing to be seduced by what is over. It's over. You're not going to let anybody refer to it. You're not going to refer to it yourself. You're just simply going to be in the present or in the future. Question: why did you do it that way? Great victimizing stance. Gets you in the position of having to defend yourself. It's already done that way. Instead of asking you, what did you learn from what you've done, and how can we repeat these errors in the future, they want to get into the whys. And what they're doing, of course, is looking for blame. And as soon as they can blame you and assign some kind of fault to what has just transpired, then you, of course, are the nice little victim. Another one: if you had only consulted me first. But it's over. That's what you have to always remind yourself. It's over. Sure, if you would have consulted them, perhaps you would have done it different. But you can never should have consulted them now when it's already over. You can't consult them on Friday about Wednesday. You can't do that any longer. Next Wednesday, yes, not last Wednesday. Or, we've always done it this way. Again, a reference to the past. Things have always been done that way, therefore you will continue to do them that way, and if you don't do them that way, then you are going to have to explain yourself. And as soon as I get you in the position of having to explain yourself, you are my victim and I'm in charge. Or, if you said it before, why don't you mean it now? You told me this before. You told me you loved me, and now you're telling me that you don't. The assumption, of course, is that people don't change, and because you say something one way a long time ago, that it still applies today. The now is the working unit of your life. The past is a thought. It's formless, it's dimensionless. You can't have it back in the physical world. The only place you can have it is in your mind. So that any reference to what was done in the past or what you said in the past is just usually an effort to get you to be their willing victim. If you don't go there, if you just know in your mind, it's almost like a new perception of reality for you. You begin to perceive reality the way it is, now, in the moment. And all of that stuff back there is only just a learning. It's only to be recalled if it's going to be effective now. If it's designed to get you to feel bad or to be manipulated, you don't go there. You simply don't go down that road. The if onlys. If only I hadn't done it that way. Or whose fault was it? That's a favorite. Let's look back and look at all the faults and all the things that we can do to assign blame. And you assign blame, you get all the blame. What I tell people to do is take all the things in your life that are wrong and that aren't working and assign blame to them. I'm fat, who's at fault? Sarah Lee, all right, or somebody like that. And I'm broke, and that's the Dow Jones fault, and or it's the Ayatollah's fault, or it's somebody else's fault. And you assign blame to everything. And now look at your life and see if it's any different. See if it's improved in any way. And you find that blame or fault finding doesn't do anything except make the victimizer one more step ahead of you in the game. All right, let's look at a few strategies here for stopping yourself from being victimized by references to the past. When someone starts telling you things that have always been a certain way and we've always done things this way, you can respond very nicely with, would you like to know if I care about what you're telling me right now? Or, do you think that what you're telling me right now is relevant? Do you believe that how we did it last Thursday or last year is really the issue here? It's like you confront it right away. And as soon as you get that, you disarm the potential victimizer. Try to eliminate the should-haves from your own life and from your own conversations, your own vocabulary. Try to get that word, what you should have or would have or could have, shoulda, woulda, coulda, out of your life. And understand that all of that is just a reference to keep you from being effective today. And it's just nothing but a blame assigner. And so don't use it yourself, and you'll find yourself flagging it real fast when other people use it on you as well. If someone asks you why you did something, give a very brief 1 or 2 sentence response, and that's it. And don't keep going on and over-explaining it, because the more you over-explain, the more you're going to find yourself victimized by them. Don't be afraid to admit that you're wrong when you do something, or just simply say you're right. You've made a very good point, and I will learn from that, and I won't do it in the future. This is one of the great things that my wife and I are able to do with each other over and over again. Instead of having these arguments that are endless, it's like you stop yourself right in the middle, and you say, you're right. You made a good point. I was a jerk. I did behave stupidly, and I'm going to see if I don't do that. It stops. I mean, I've seen my wife have her mouth fall almost onto the floor when I've just turned around and stopped being pushy about it and admitted, yeah, you made a good point. And usually the person doing the most talking is the one that's wrong. Try to learn from the past rather than repeating it and making references to it all the time. And silently forgive all of the people in your life who you feel have victimized you in some way. That's such an important lesson to learn. Forgiveness. That all of those people who behaved towards you in the past that you might still be hanging on today, the ex-spouse, the child that hasn't called, the person who borrowed money from you who hasn't repaid it, the parent or the grandparent who ignored you or abused you in some way, that forgiveness is a very, very powerful tool. All of the spiritual masters who've ever come our way, including, of course, Christ on the cross when someone threw a spear and a soldier threw a spear into him, and his first words are, forgive them, for he knows not what he does. That's such an important concept to get, that he doesn't, the reason that Christ was saying he knows not what he does is because he was really saying that when you throw a spear into me, you throw a spear into yourself, because we're all connected, we're all one. And the same thing is true for all the people who have thrown spears into you, if you will, or have harmed you in some way. It's like a snake bite. If a snake comes along and bites you, no one ever died from a snake bite. The bite is just a bite. It's just a wound. And you can't unbite someone. A snake can't unbite you. What kills you is the venom that is pouring through your system and destroying you. And the metaphor there is that what is destructive to you in this whole business of not being victimized by what is over is the venom, which is your thoughts that you carry around. The behavior is done. You can't undo it. You can't change it. You can't unabuse someone. You can't not abandon them now if you already did. You can't repay the money that you never repaid. I mean, that's all done. That's all. You didn't do it. That's over with. But what you can do now is decide not to carry that around, not to let their behavior destroy you. Mark Twain put it this way. He said, forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. And you have to know how to do that. Because once you let it go and get rid of it, and I can remember someone was trying to sue me at one time over some silly little thing, and I was angry and filled with rage about it and going to really show them that they couldn't do it. And once I let it go, and once I sent forgiveness out there and sent love where I was sending hate before, the suit was dropped, and all of the things that I worried about so much just, melted away. And the same thing will happen with so much of the victimizing that you do. Get forgiveness into your heart, and you'll find yourself a whole lot better off and not being victimized by all that stuff that happened years and years and years ago that isn't worth hanging on to anyway. Pulling your own strings. Another common way that people pull your strings instead of you pulling them yourself is this whole business of what I call the comparison trap. In a world of individuals, comparison is a senseless activity. You are unique in all the world. No one can get behind your eyeballs and be you. No one can experience you. The only thing that anyone can experience you with is their mind. Everything else is a step removed. Their thoughts are what they have to experience you with. And so too do you experience everyone else with your thoughts. Otherwise, you are experiencing existential aloneness. Existential aloneness is really very different than loneliness. You see, loneliness is experienced when you don't like the person you're alone with. But aloneness is just in the way of things. You can be in a crowd at the largest stadium in the world, surrounded by 100,000 screaming people, and you experience it uniquely, alone. No one can get behind your eyeballs and inside your ears and experience it and hear it the way you hear it. Your red that you see, the color red, is your red, and it can't be mine. You can't see it the way I see it. And this is a very important mental concept to get to avoid being victimized by other people, because as you'll see in just a moment, there are people out there who would compare you all the time and use this as a way of controlling and manipulating and getting you to behave in the ways that they want you to behave. When you understand your existential aloneness, when you know that you are unique and special in all the world, then you stop the inclination to compare yourself to other people. You stop constantly telling yourself that you have to be like others. You stop constantly striving to accomplish and achieve at the same level that other people have achieved at. You get past this whole need to keep up with the Joneses, because that's a way of putting yourself into a victim trap that it's almost impossible to get out of. You see, even if you're in a race with somebody else, if you're looking over your shoulder to see how you're doing in comparison to how the other person is doing, then what you're really doing at that moment is saying that you are in charge of how I am feeling right now. However you perform, and my comparison to you is what makes me happy or not happy, and you've turned the strings over to somebody else. This is a really big area for most people. Most people find themselves unable to isolate themselves from comparing themselves from other people. Children grow up in a world where we hear things about peer pressure all the time, that there's a lot of peer pressure, that everybody has to fit in, and if you don't fit in, then you're isolated, and if you're isolated, then you're a reject, and if you're a reject, then you're an outcast, and it all goes on to all of these horrible labels that we place on people. We have to raise children to understand that there's no peer pressure in the world, that there are people out there who are saying, do things the way I do them, and then there are individuals who say, wait, I've got a mind of my own. You want your children to have a mind of their own. You too want to have a mind of your own. You want to think for yourself. You don't want to have somebody telling you constantly that you have to do it because everybody else does it. If you do things the way everybody else does, what have you got to offer? I mean, if you're just like everybody else, you have nothing to offer. You're just one more sheep bleeding away. You don't want to be that way. You want to understand that, yes, there are standards and there are norms within a society, and that we accept those as living standards. But I don't compare myself to other people. I don't have to go out into the world and look at other people to determine how I'm doing in my life. That's got to be an inner thing. That's something that has to come from within. And yet there are people out there, there's many of them, who are going to constantly compare you and use all kinds of techniques and strategies to get you to conform by saying, don't you see that other people are doing that? But the first thing you have to do before you can even eliminate other people doing it to you is to get rid of it yourself. Get rid of this whole notion that I have to be somebody who other people accept or like in order for me to feel good. And you don't want your children to be believing that, well, everybody else does drugs, so that's why I did it. Or everybody else is jumping off the cliff, so that's why I jumped. Or everybody else is drinking and driving, so that's why I do it. Or everybody else is not wearing any clothes to school, so that's why I go naked. I mean, it's an absurdity. And if you're constantly comparing them to others, then don't be surprised when they do it themselves. Raise them to understand that there are peers out there who will try to pressure you, but if you buy into it, then you are the victim. That you have to decide for yourself what is morally proper and improper, and what works and doesn't work, and what is effective and ineffective, and not some invisible standard called peer pressure that is the biggest cop-out I've ever heard of. Let's look at some of the victim traps in this comparison business. Here's the first one. Why aren't you more like your brother? Or why aren't you more like your sister? Or why aren't you more like Sally down the street? You find when somebody else is telling you to look at yourself and ask you the question, why aren't you like the other husbands or the other wives or the other workers and so on, that's something that you have to send a flag up for. And my response when anybody ever does that to me is, if I'm just like everybody else, what do I have to offer? I'm not here to be like the guy down the street. That isn't what I'm here for. I have my own purpose. He has his. He's on his path. I'm on mine. And I'm not here to emulate him. And you stop it. You put a stop to it right there. Another common one is nobody else is complaining. So you might have a reason to complain about some injustice, but since nobody else is doing it, then the victimizer will constantly be reminding you, well, look around you. Nobody else is saying anything, so why are you? What's wrong with you? As if everybody else's behavior ought to be determining your own. Margaret Mead had a wonderful line in one of her monographs back in 1934. She said, don't ever think for a minute that a small group of people who are committed to social change can't make a difference. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. A small group, an individual, who has an idea, who doesn't want to be just like everybody else, can really make the whole world change. In fact, that's how all change comes about. It starts with an individual or a small group of people. Here's a great one. What if everybody in the world behaved like you do? What if everybody was like... And it's like, there's the comparison, comparing you to everybody else in the world, and then why aren't you fitting in? Or you should be satisfied with what you have. Everybody else is satisfied. Or don't make such a scene. You're embarrassing me now around other people. It's like the whole inclination to look at what other people are saying or thinking or doing is a reason for you to quietly go away and be my victim. Another one that's a favorite of mine that you see in our culture a lot is, this is what God wants me to do. A lot of people use God as a reason for why they're doing what they're doing, as if God talks to them very specifically. You know, you hear some of the serial murderers using the same kind of analogy. You know, God told me to do it. Be very careful of anyone who believes that God specifically talks only to them and to no one else, and uses that as a reason why you should be doing what they decide you should do. So how do you overcome this? What kind of things can you do to not be the victim of someone comparing you and controlling you through those kinds of comparisons? First and foremost, when you're in any confrontation where someone is using references to other people and expecting you to go along, you have to remember that his comparisons have nothing to do with you. He would say that to anyone. It just happens to be that you're the person who's there. Refuse to be upset, and you'll be well on the way to avoiding these often insulting efforts at victimization. You have to know that your emotional reaction to those things is in you. It's not in them, it's in you. And they come from how you process it. If somebody starts comparing me to somebody else, I laugh inside. There was a time when I would get angry, but I'm way past that now. I don't need to do that. I see it for what it is. I know what they're trying to do, and I refuse to be compared to anyone in my life. And I do that in my mind. And as a result of doing that in my mind, I then can carry it out in my actions. When someone's giving you an argument, like in a store when you're taking something back and telling you, and this happens all the time, well, they'll start telling you about, well, just last week I had a customer where we had the very same thing, and sure, there they go off on this long, windy story, and there you are, getting ready to put on your little victim hat, And you respond with that very, very nicely with, do you think I care about the customer you had last week? Or why would I want to hear about how you dealt with other people? I'm concerned about this here and now. You keep it focused where it belongs. Remember that the victimizer is doing this to get you to go along with their program. So you have to put a halt to it. Practice using sentences that begin with the word you rather than I. Very, very helpful technique. One of the most helpful things that I can ever give to you. You want me to feel that last week's customer was an important thing to bring up. So you feel. If you start the sentence with you, you're putting the focus where it belongs, right back there. If you put it on I, you get into a defensive posture where you have to explain yourself. If someone is speaking very loudly and angrily towards you, your response is, you're really getting upset as you're telling me this. Or you really want me to listen to 5 stories about what happened last month when I want to talk about what happened here today. You, this is what you're doing. Instead of, I don't want to hear all this, and then you get yourself all mad and all worked up and so on, and you're in that defensive posture. Another good strategy is to label what the person is doing. You just simply say you're upset and you're comparing me with someone else. And that's an upfront statement. The moment that you find yourself dealing with a clerk or someone who is not going to go along with what you want or isn't going to help you out or is a middleman to keep you from reaching someone who has authority, the minute that you sense it, the second that happens, you stop talking to that person. You say, thank you very much, I appreciate your time, and you walk away, and now you regroup, and you start over. And you say, who is the person that has authority in here? Who is truly the person that can make this happen for me? Once you do that, you'll find yourself going into the... You see, what happens is if you go up through the chain of command, that each higher level, whether it's a refund policy or it's a bank loan or whatever it may be, each higher level has got to defend the person below him. He can't overrule that person. That's what they're there for. That's why they have that job. So if you start out above them, you start out going right to the person who can make a decision, even if it's a little more cumbersome to do that, you want to make that effort, because the moment that you have gotten to 2 or 3 people who have now been defended, when they get to the top person, they simply have to defend all of the people that he's got out there underneath him. So avoid all of those people in the beginning and tell the person, I've come directly to you because I understand that you're the decision maker here. And then you make your case for whatever it is that you want. Albert Einstein once wrote these words. He said, great spirits have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds. The truly great people, the ones who are going to really make a big impact in the world, the ones who are making a difference in the world, are always resisted by people who want to stay mediocre and want to keep things average and want to keep things the way they've always been. Be one of the great spirits and know that the violent opposition that you're encountering is just other people's efforts to keep you at the status quo. If you refuse to go there and use some of these strategies and refuse to compare yourself and refuse to look back and deal effectively from a position of self-esteem now, you won't be victimized. Another major area of being victimized, if you really want to pull your own strings, you have to learn how to be quietly effective. And get this, you will never be understood. The greatest understanding you can have is that you don't understand. And spending your life and your energy and your relationships on trying to always be understood and have someone else agree with you and understand you is one sure way to make sure that you're going to be a victim for the duration of that relationship. You don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to allow yourself to be in a position where someone else is demanding to be understood by you. There's some things that are very simple, some very simple little clues that I use in my own life and in pulling your own strings that I'd like to share here with you. Under the heading of being quietly effective and knowing you're never going to be understood. First is that shrugging is a virtue. If you could just learn the art of the shrug. I like Ayn Rand's title, Atlas Shrugged. Atlas holding up the whole world and just shrugs. And the whole idea of not having to be in a position to defend yourself or to be understood, or somebody's demanding something from you, and when you could just sort of shrug your shoulders and say, well, I don't understand. I just don't understand, and that's okay. My wife and I do this to each other all the time. I mean, she does the craziest things in the world, and vice versa. I mean, she thinks what I do is crazy too. I mean, she believes in what she's doing and believes that that's the way a house has to be run, for example. She makes the beds first thing in the morning. I mean, that to her is just her way. I have lived under the philosophy that it's not any healthier psychologically to get into a made bed than it is to get into an unmade bed. But she makes the bed. I don't understand somebody getting out of bed in the morning and making the bed, but I don't have to understand. It's not necessary for me to understand. I don't have to get into a you're wrong and I'm right attitude toward it. It's just a simple shrug. If you want to make the bed, that's terrific. I'll even help you if you want to. Just let it go. You don't have to. I don't have to understand that. She puts the glasses in the cupboard with the lips going down. I put them facing up. I don't understand that. How could anybody face them down? But that's the way she does things, and that's perfectly all right. And you know something? Life is full of those little things. Everywhere you go, you're going to encounter people who do things their own way. And that's really what makes the world go round, that uniqueness, that specialness in people. So if you just shrug at it and stop telling yourself that I have to be right and I have to make somebody else wrong in all of my interactions with them, just shrug. Just shrug, quietly shrug your shoulders and say, they have a right, they're on their own path, they have a right to do what they want to do. And you don't have to be understood. And when you get into that mindset of not needing to be understood all the time, then you're not going to be explaining yourself and having somebody else explain themselves to you over and over again endlessly. Being offended is a choice to be a victim. You ever think how silly it is to go around being offended? There are people who turn on the radio and they hear somebody speaking in a certain tone or saying a word that they don't like, and they have a whole vocabulary of words that they're offended by. And if somebody says one of them, right away they go off into a dither. Well, it's just like letting somebody else's behavior decide how you're going to be emotionally. I mean, you can be the kind of person who goes down the street and your emotions are being pulled by everybody else, your strings are being yanked by everybody else in the street, depending on what words they choose, what symbols come out of their mouth. This person says hell, that one says damn, this one says uh-oh, this one says caca, that one says poo-poo, this one says wee-wee, whatever it may be, and you're offended, or whatever synonyms you want to use for all of those functions. For what? It's like allowing yourself the right to process somebody else's behavior for what it is. It's their behavior. It's not yours. If you don't like what somebody is saying on the radio, tune the dial someplace else. If you don't like the way somebody else is dressing, turn your eyes someplace else. Don't feast your eyes on it. If someone else wants to hear rock music that you think is disgusting, then don't listen to it. That's what this whole thing is about. That's what the First Amendment to the Constitution is about. That's what free speech is about. That's what free expression as a human being is about. That there's no code that is going to fit everyone. And choosing not to be offended is to choose not to be a victim. People speak the way they speak. I don't like some of the language that I see in the films. I don't let my children go and see some of the film. I don't like the violence that is on the screen. Rather than being offended by it and being all upset about it and getting myself worked up and being a victim to the people who choose to display violence on the screens, I simply don't go to those movies. I don't have anything to do with them. And I don't miss them, and I happen to believe that it's part of the gratuitous violence that we find throughout the culture. But I'm doing what I can to eliminate that. But being offended by it, being upset by it, it's as silly as being offended by starvation. Starvation is a part of what the universe is about. And so is my desire to change it and to improve it. That's just as important. And that's what I go with. I go with what I'm for rather than what I'm against. Everything that you're against weakens you. Everything that you're for empowers you. So the question is, do you want to be empowered or do you want to be weakened? Everything you fight, you'll be weaker for the effort. Everything that you're for will empower you. When they asked Mother Teresa if she would march against the war in Vietnam in 1967, she said, no, I won't. She said, but if you have a march for peace, I'll be there. And there's a big difference. All of the people in the world who are against terrorists, if they suddenly were for peace and worked for peace and devoted their life for peace, there wouldn't be any terrorists left. But all of us who are against terrorists and want to fight them become more warriors, more need to have more hostility and so on in the world. It's very important to know for yourself that whenever you're offended by the behavior or the actions of somebody else, as morally right as you may find yourself to be and as reprehensible as you may find their behavior to be, it still is letting somebody else pull your strings. It is your emotions clanging up or clanging down, depending upon what somebody else outside of you does. And you just simply don't have to give them that kind of power. And when you do, and you find yourself offended and all upset and your blood pressure up and your ulcer growing, know that it's because you have given that kind of power to them, not because of what the other people have done. Also, it's important to, if you want to be quietly effective and know that other people aren't going to understand you all the time, is to stop analyzing your relationship to death. I've said over and over again that relationships that work because there is no work. Who wants to go to work all day and go home and get in the car and say, okay, now I've been working all day, now I got to go home and work tonight. I got to work on my relationship. And now it's like the rest of the night until midnight you're working on your relationship, then you dream about it, and your whole life becomes this enormous job. So you see, there's two ways to look at virtually anything. One is the violent way and one is the peaceful way. That's the yin and the yang of the universe. The violent way is to analyze something. When you take something and analyze it, you tear it apart. You break it open. You crush it. You dissect it. You pull it all apart and see what's in it. So that's what people do with a relationship. Analyzing is a very violent intellectual act, if you've never thought of that. And it's a victimizing stance. It's violent intellectually in that it tears apart. Now, the opposite of analyzing something is synthesizing, that is, bringing together, looking at what holds it together. What are the similarities? What is it that we have in common here? And how much do we enjoy each other? What are we for? If you're in a relationship and you understand that what you think about is what expands, or as you think, so shall you be, is true, and you're thinking about what is wrong or what is missing in your partner, then for you, your experience of them will be what is missing or what is wrong, because what you think about is what expands. So what you want to do is get focused in your relationships on what you are for. What do you like about that person? And observe that. Unless you want the negativity to expand, then focus your mind on that, because whatever your mind is on will be your experience of them. You can't get behind your eyeballs and be that person and be your spouse. You only have your mind to experience your spouse with. And if your mind is on what's wrong, then that's what will be your experience. If your mind is on what's missing, on what you don't like, then that will be your experience. And that's what analyzing a relationship almost always is about. You do this, and I don't like that, and this is wrong, and then that becomes your experience on it. When I look at my wife after being gone on a business trip or whatever, I look at the divineness that is in back of her form. I look at the thoughts, the beauty that is in the invisible part of her, and I'm just grateful that she's there, rather than thinking about all the things that she's done that I don't like or that we argued about or whatever. I don't want that to continue to expand. And so I don't want to analyze our relationship. I just want to love her and be loved for what we are. Because, as Robert Frost said, you love the things you love for what they are. Not for what they ought to be or what they used to be or what they can do for you, but for what they are. When you fall in love with someone, you fall in love with what they are. You don't look in their eyes and say, you're really beautiful, but if only your eyes were a different color, then I could like you so much better. Or if only you were a little taller or a little shorter or your hair were a little this or that. You don't do that. You just go, You're just so gaga in love because you are loving what they are. And then you get into a relationship and mature the relationship, and now your mature relationship is, you should have done this, and if only you did that. And that's what destroys it. What you want to do is maintain that, I love you for what you are. And we don't have to analyze it. When you're falling in love, you don't analyze anything. You just simply enjoy being with each other. Arguing isn't worth defending. I know that people do it. I do it sometimes. I see it as a weakness when I do it. It is not worth defending. Usually the person doing the most talking in the argument is the one who's wrong, who is trying to overstate their case. And I just was reminded of a cartoon that was in the New Yorker, where a fellow said, I'll tell you why I'm yelling. I'll tell you why I'm yelling. I'm yelling because I'm wrong. And it's that kind of admission that you finally realize right in the middle of it that, I'm raising my voice because I don't know what else to do. And I've just realized that I've been, arguing isn't worth defending. Arguing really is saying, if only you were more like me, then I could like you much better. That's behind almost every argument that we have. If only you could process the world the way I process it, we wouldn't be having any of these problems. But that isn't what you fall in love with. You don't want someone who's exactly like you. That's redundant. I mean, who needs another you? You already got one of those. What do you need two of them for? You fall in love with what's missing in you, and that's usually the opposite. And so usually the great loves are very much opposites, and that's what you're attracted to. And you'll find that working over and over again. If you hear people saying, we have everything in common, we like to do everything together and we share the same, then you can be sure that that relationship isn't going to last long. Because who needs somebody else to be exactly like you are already? Now you got it tridundant, if there's such a word. So one of the big victimizing traps that we're talking about here is in this whole business about being quietly effective is, I simply do not understand you. And then you buying into that and saying, well, then I guess my role is to get you to understand, and I'll do everything I can to get you to understand. And there you go. Hook, line, and sinker, you just took the big one. You are on your way to being their victim. Here's some of the traps. I don't understand why you do those things. Right away, you're in the trap if you try to explain it. How could you do such a thing? I've never heard of such a thing. How could someone with your brains and your background do such a thing? Now it's like adding a little bit of insult to it. I'm not only shocked and scandalized, but disappointed because you, of all people, I'm stumped. You just have me perplexed. That's a great one. And now you've got to unperplex them, and you're going to be a victim as soon as you play that game. Please go over it one more time so I'll understand it. This is a very favorite. We've already been over it 642 times, but one more time and I'll get it. And that one more time, you're going to become their victim. If only you knew how I'm suffering. Now we add guilt to it. All right? You don't understand me, and I'm suffering because I don't understand you. I can't believe you're going to do that now. Not now. Not when, and you can fill in the blank. All right? And this is like, I don't understand how you could possibly be going to do something like that now. You're going to go out jogging now when all of the family is here? You're supposed to stay around and get fat like the rest of them, or whatever. And you just simply teach them that you are running your life, and this is what I'm going to do, and you can lean over and give them a big kiss and say, yeah, you'll get over it, or whatever. But you don't, whatever you do, stop to explain why you're going jogging now, because you'll never get your jogging in if you do. Let's look at a few strategies here on how to avoid this I don't understand game and being quietly effective. Stop explaining yourself whenever you realize that you resent doing so. The minute you realize that you are now in a defensive posture of explaining yourself because someone doesn't understand in any way, stop instantly right there. Feel free to explain yourself if you're doing so, but if you feel compelled to, your strings are being pulled and the demands of others are controlling your life. Stop telling yourself that you are responsible for making people understand you. That's the game. They don't understand, and that's how they get you to be what they want you to be. Don't feel that you have a need to get them to understand. If they don't get it, they don't get it, and they probably aren't going to get it. There's a lot of people who don't get a lot of the things that I do in my life. My children don't understand a lot of the things I do. They don't understand why I meditate. I meditate every morning. A lot of people think that's really silly. But I don't care if they think it's silly, and I don't have to get them to understand what I get out of it. It is my way of going within and discovering a higher part of myself, and I go there. And now I have taught all of the people in my life that that's the way it's going to be. And when a stranger comes along, or a family member who isn't around, and they think it's absurd that I'm going to go meditating when everybody else is going off to breakfast, then I know I've got one more person who is trying to victimize me and get me to not do something that I want to do, and I just simply don't go that way. One of the great questions to ask when people are doing this to you is to ask the question, do you think you could ever understand? I mean, if I explained it in a language or in words that you really got, do you think you would still understand? Or are you just simply stuck in not understanding? And maybe you can know that the greatest understanding you can have is that you don't understand, and that's okay. Try not to allow yourself to be seduced into arguments. One of the best ways to do that is to just use the sentence, the word you. You want me to argue right now, and I really just don't want to. I don't really feel like I need to explain myself. And that's enough. Don't get yourself seduced into it. And learn to accept that other people are going to label you in a certain way. Other people are going to think you're weird. Others are going to think you're freaky and strange. And that's okay. There's a lot of people out there who think that about me. And it's fine. That's just their attitude. That's their belief. And I have no interest or need to get them to understand me. I just want them to be leaving me alone. I want them to stand out of my light, if you will, and not keep me from doing the things that are important for me to do. And whether you understand me or not is really of very little consequence. And that's the whole message of this section, is to know that people are going to try all of their might with I don't understand, and all of the little substations of I don't understand to get you to be their victim and do things the way they want you to. Don't buy into it, and you'll find yourself not explaining yourself anymore. All right, let's take a look at a few more of the ways that people are victimized. Keep in mind as we go through this one sentence. You get treated in life the way you teach people to treat you. You get treated in life the way you teach people to treat you. If you find yourself being treated in a way that you resent or that turns you into a victim, ask yourself the question, what have I done to teach this person that this is something I'm willing to tolerate? What did I do the very first time somebody raised their voice to me or talked disrespectfully to me? What did I do when one of my children disobeyed me and now they do it all the time? How did I teach them that I'm willing to put up with this? No blame, no fault, no self-reproachment, just an understanding that you have taught these people what you're willing to accept. Once you take responsibility for it, then you can do something to change it. If you're just blaming them, then you're waiting for them to change in order for your problems to go away. And that's like if you drop your key inside the house and you look outside on the street for it. I mean, why would you look outside when the solution is inside? If you dropped it inside, you got to find it inside. And what you have to learn to do is develop an inner candle flame that never flickers, though the worst goes before you. You must know that all of the problems, all the difficulties, all the victimization that you may feel in your life, all of the strings that are being pulled by somebody else, are really things that you have allowed up until now. And now you make a recommitment to your own excellence or your own non-victim status, if you will. So you want to teach other people how you want to be treated. You teach them with behavior, not with words. You become very aware of when they are trying to victimize and control you, and you put a stop to it. One of the great ways that people do this is by judging rather than accepting things for what they are. There are a great many things in the world that we talk about as if they were real, but they are just only judgments. You know, the only difference between a flower and a weed is a judgment, and that's true of people as well. Here's some things that don't exist in the world. Disasters, luck, a dumb bird, a normal attitude, a guarantee, a dreadful dress, a gorgeous hairdo, terrible language, a nice lady, an awful sight, a good boy, a stupid person. These are all judgments. And you have to learn the difference between judging and what is real. Some of the categories of where people dichotomize and judge are good and bad. They try to put the whole world into what is good and what is bad based upon some perception I have. And those things that don't fit into it the way I think they ought to be are bad, and all the things that I agree with are good. And so you find yourself going through your whole life running into half of the people or more who are doing things in a different way than you do and judging them all to be bad and therefore being their victim because they now own your emotional strings. Remember, being a victim isn't necessarily a physical thing. In fact, that's very seldom the thing because we have laws to protect each other from being physically abused by each other. It isn't as if somebody's putting you into a jail, into a cell. It is the victimization is what you experience in your mind and in your emotions. And this comes from judging, from categorizing, from compartmentalizing people and putting them into the compartments. And then when they don't fit with the behavior that you think they should exhibit, you find yourself upset and worked up and angry and hurt. Good and bad and right and wrong and beautiful and ugly. There's no beautiful people in the world. There's no ugly people in the world. People are just the way they are. They look exactly the way they do, the way they're supposed to look. They're part of the perfect intelligence that is in all things in the universe, that invisible intelligence that is within all of us. But if you categorize people that way, then you are finding yourself potentially a victim. It's really important to develop a quiet mind when it comes to all of this. A quiet mind is a mind that is at peace, a mind that doesn't judge. One of the things you learn about judgment is that you do not define anybody else with your judgments. You only define yourself as someone who needs to judge. Just because you label somebody else to be something obnoxious or nasty or hurtful doesn't mean that that's what they are. That's just your judgment, and that's your definition of yourself as someone who needs to judge. People are not defined by your judgments. People are defined by their own thoughts and their own actions that are subsequent to those thoughts. So learning not to judge and unclogging your mind, if you will, of judgments and negativity and quieting your mind. It's like if you could spend an hour a day in meditation. The great French philosopher and scientist Pascal said that all of man's troubles stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone. you sit quietly in a room alone and go within and discover that higher consciousness, whatever you want to call it, whether you call it God or soul or spirit or Louise, it doesn't make any difference what you label it. If you go within and discover that and spend time each day inside of yourself, just peacefully being there and asking the questions, how may I serve? And what is my purpose? And what can I do to make this life a better one? And how can I serve people rather than be victimized by them or victimizing anybody else? You find that developing that kind of a quiet, peaceful, serene mind is something that will allow you to process the whole world in a more peaceful way. And when you get to that point where you are aligning yourself spiritually, or you are aligning yourself with the invisible part of your humanity, the part that defies form, that doesn't begin and doesn't end, when you align yourself there, and that becomes your first priority, you start noticing that you don't get victimized as much. I've really noticed that as I've gotten myself on a higher spiritual path and a more peaceful path for myself and more at ease with myself, that I've begun to take much better care of my body, that I notice that when I don't expect people to be abusive towards me, that I hardly ever see it anymore. It's really rare that I see it. I know that when I get in the car and I have a 17-mile ride to go to my home from my office, and there's a lot of traffic lights and there's a lot of traffic and a lot of slow drivers and so on, I know that when I visualize in advance in my mind that this is going to be a very pleasant experience, and I see myself, if somebody's cutting me off in advance, that I see myself not allowing myself to be upset and depressed by that. I see myself going through that whole process of driving all the way home in advance. This is before I've even opened the car. And I sort of play it out in my mind. And then I get in and I just allow the physical now to follow the thought that I just had, the visualization that I just had. And sure enough, somebody will get in there and cut me off or drive slowly or whatever. And for me, it's like I just see them as part of the perfection of it all. They're exactly where they're supposed to be at that moment. I'm no longer a victim. I have aligned myself first with my mind, knowing that I can create in my mind what I want, and then not allowing myself to be victimized when those things occur. And as I do that, I go through my life, I find that as I am more peaceful and I send out more harmony and more love and more forgiveness and more kindness and more of all the things I've been talking about on this tape, if you send that out more, that's what you get back. If you send out hostility and pain and suffering and anger and wanting to make other people wrong and wanting to prove yourself all the time, if you send out that kind of energy from yourself, that's exactly what you're going to get back. Send out love, you'll get back love. Send out anger and impatience, and that's what you'll get. Pulling your own strings truly is about looking within and knowing that no one can make you a victim without your consent. No one.